Welcome to the Outsmart Burnout podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Zaria Rubin, a functional medicine doctor, an international speaker, and a burnout badass because I've been there myself. After walking away from my own high-stress medical career, I discovered how to break free from burnout to reclaim my passion, purpose, and joy. And now I'm here to help you do the same. From science-backed tips to time-saving hacks, and hopefully some aha moments that just might change your life. So sit back, relax, and let's do this. Welcome to Outsmart Burnout, the podcast where we challenge traditional career paradigms and beliefs and help high achievers reclaim their passion, purpose, and joy. Today's guest is Dr. Sara Margolin, Associate Professor of Psychology, Philosophy, and Neuroscience at SUNY Brockport, with expertise in aging, memory, cognition, and the science of healthy brain function across the lifespan. In this episode, Dr. Margolin helps us reframe aging with all of the emotional, physical, and psychological baggage it can bring. She'll dive into how our brains actually adapt with age, what cognitive resilience means, and how you can build sustainable mental, emotional, and energetic health that lasts well beyond the early hustle years. So whether you're in midlife, coming out of burnout, or simply curious about how aging well ties into long-term wellness, this conversation is for you. As a former neurologist clawing my way back from perimenopause brain, I cannot wait to dive into this conversation. So welcome to the podcast, Dr. Sara.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure. I am so excited to dive into this topic because I feel like it's just at the forefront of all of the news headlines and all of the science and the breakthroughs and the questions we all have. And I guess I always like to start at the beginning with the origin story of our heroine. And how did you end up gravitating towards this field and choosing aging as an area of specialization?
So I think it found me more like. So as an undergraduate student, I was pre-med and, taking all of the biology and physics and chemistry classes, but my school didn't have a pre-med major. Like that wasn't something you could sign on for, which I think is pretty common in most schools. And so I didn't know what to choose for my major. And my sister said, just put down psychology, you'll like it. I was like, okay, sure, fine. So I wrote down psychology, back in the day when it was like, writing on a form, right?
Yeah.
And so I was taking the psychology classes like alongside my pre-med classes, and I really kind of got interested in the ones that were more like biological, neuropsychology, cognitive psychology, sensation and perception, all of those things. And so I got to my last semester.
Those were my favorite classes in college as well. And it
Right?
should have meant something to me like, girlfriend, you should be a psych major, not a bio major, but alas.
And so I got to my last semester and I went, I don't want to go to medical school. I mean, I was in the trenches of studying for the MCATs. Like I was in it. I was like, I don't want to do this.
You
And
and
I'm
me
like,
both, girl.
I was like, now's the time to jump ship or else I'm stuck, right? So, on a whim, with 2 weeks before the deadline, I shifted and applied to one doctoral program in psychology, and it was for cognitive and sensory processes. And I was like, there's no way I'm getting in, but if I don't, then I'll just try again next year. I got in and I got accepted to work under a woman who studied aging. And I had never even considered that being anything. And she said, well, you don't have to. Like, she wasn't going to make me do that. I could just study cognition. But she's like, please give it a try. I loved it. So all of my graduate work was under her. Her name was Lisa Abrams. And, we studied language and memory and the intersection, how it changes with age. And I was training under a National Institute on Aging training program. And I, finished my graduate work in 2007. and immediately was hired as a professor at SUNY Brockport, and I've been there ever since.
Wow, that's so
Yeah.
fascinating. It's so crazy because when I was in residency, I decided to do a research project and I chose to specialize in neuropsych. And so my mentor was actually Dr. Brenda Milner, who is quite a famous psychologist
Mhm.
and is still around. She's 107, I believe. I know. It's unbelievable, and she was
Yeah.
really a pioneer in memory work and worked with patient HM, a really
Oh my
famous
gosh.
epilepsy patient where we learned that, how memory works and that you
Mhm.
take out the hippocampus, you might do okay. If you take out both hippocampi, you're not gonna be okay. So that was, like, such fascinating work for me, and we studied language and we studied the, you know, neural origins and patterns of bilingualism because I was
Oh, wow.
living in Montreal, Quebec. It's where I'm from. So I was really fascinated with bilingual language and early, native bilinguals versus later in life people,
Right.
language learners. So it was super interesting, fascinating work. And I'm a former neurologist, so I am a brain junkie and just find it so fascinating how the brain works, how cognition works, how
Mhm.
learning and memory works, and
Mhm.
and how all of this can interact with our daily lives and stress and burnout
Mhm.
and the whole midlife perimenopause transition, which let me tell you, I was not prepared for. Like,
Mhm.
I was prepared for hot flashes, etc. That didn't happen. What did happen was that my brain, I used to say, like, it felt like someone took it out, put it in a blender, pressed start, and then, like, put it back in.
I mean, that's kind of what it feels like sometimes. Yeah.
So, I am excited to dive into this conversation and talk about maybe some of the myths versus reality about cognition and aging.
Oh my
Like,
god.
oh, use it or lose it, or that it's normal to lose brain function as you get older. And so, tell us a bit more about that. Some of
Okay,
the
so it's
myths
funny.
and things that you've noticed.
So it's funny that you put it in that framework because last year I published a textbook that is like organized in that way, where each unit is a myth about aging, and
Oh
we
my
explore
god.
the whole myth versus fact, and here's the fact. And so yes, I love to talk about the myths.
Perfect.
So
Perfect.
use it or lose it is usually the phrase that if someone wants to know what happens when we get older. That's the meat of it. Use it or lose it. And there's a few reasons for that. The first is there's one type of intelligence, fluid intelligence, that can wane and disappear. I mean, not disappear, but it can wane over time if we're not using it. And that's like our critical thinking skills, our creativity, our problem solving, those kinds of things. Particularly once we've retired and we're not working on projects at work anymore and we're doing those sorts of things, we will lose some of those.
Okay, so the fact that I do all of the New York Times puzzles every day, like all of the word puzzles, that's good?
That's very so that's the other piece of it actually. So a word puzzle can sometimes be critical thinking. The New York Times one, I would say yes, definitely is. But in other cases, it's more of strengthening connection. So this is the other piece of use it or lose it that I like to talk about. And it's not so much that we're really losing anything, but that we're weakening the connection to get it. So it's almost like a dresser drawer that's got stuff in it. And if you don't like open it over time, it's going to get stuck, and so we want to make sure that we're occasionally opening the drawer so that we can get in it when we want to. So doing like Wordle, or I love to do a word search just when I'm like
Those are fun.
sitting around, that's not gonna really work on our fluid intelligence because it's not really like causing us to be creative or think necessarily outside of the box, but it is allowing us to practice using words, which can minimize the difficulty we have in retrieving them from memory later.
So Connections is a really fun puzzle in the New York Times. I play that one every day too, where they give you a bunch of words and you have to figure out how they sort into 4 categories 4
Yeah.
words per category, and the categories are really tricky, like, they're not obvious, and that's a really fun one, so I like that
That's
one.
actually very similar to it, and you may have used this task as a neurologist. There's an executive function task that asks you to like categorize different items, and you have to see if it's part of that category. So, yeah, it is working towards our executive function, which is our frontal lobe brain function. So, I would say use it or lose it. Do anything that you can do that's going to make your mind work. And, that might be reading a book. That might be, in some cases, watching TV. Now, I wouldn't say like all the time because TV can be quite passive. But if you're watching maybe like Murder She Wrote or something and you're trying to figure out the mystery along with it, then that's exercising your mind. My husband will occasionally catch me watching like the Kardashians. He's like, "Why are you
Oh,
watching that?" And
sometimes
I'm
you
like,
need
you know
some
what?
brain candy.
It's brain candy, I don't have to think too much, and I honestly really like their sibling dynamic. They're, like, really good to each other.
It's good to know that even watching Netflix can
It
sometimes be good
can.
for your brain.
It can, yeah. My favorite thing, though, is I always recommend, like, a book club because it hits aging in, like, multiple ways. So you're reading a book, right? And in some cases, it's a book you wouldn't have picked up unless your friends told you to pick it up, right? And so you're trying something new, maybe learning something new, depending on, maybe it's a different genre, maybe it's nonfiction and you normally read fiction, something like that. And then you're also creating social relationships. So particularly if you join a book club that isn't like your immediate friend circle,
Mm,
but, like, at a public library, for example, you're meeting new people, you're creating new relationships, you're making connections, and that actually is very helpful for our overall brain health later in life. So, I always recommend a book club because I'm a book nerd, but
same.
even beyond that, like, I feel like you're getting multiple pathways to successful brain aging.
Yeah. Okay. I love it. And I know another thing that you mentioned creativity and having some sort of creative outlets or
Mhm,
ways to strengthen that creative
mhm,
muscle. That's
mhm,
something that's important as well. And so one of my other passions is I sing in a choir. And I know that singing can be
mhm,
very good for brain health and
yeah,
aging. And again, there's the social component
mhm,
where you are together with other people, you're creating something collectively.
mhm,
You're not isolated. I know that it protects against depression
mhm.
and anxiety and even, cardiovascular disease and Alzheimer's.
Yeah, it
So,
really does. And it can relieve stress because you have now a companion to, in between songs or before or after practice, you can talk to them
yeah,
about things. And that's very common in women for them to like go to a friend and have like a confidant and someone to talk to. Like the Golden
yeah.
Girls, the perfect example of this. Like that's what they did is they always had that person. Men don't tend to do it in that regard, but women will definitely, they call it tend and befriend, and they'll go to look for that connection, particularly in times of stress.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about that a little more. I know that, when they examined these different regions, the blue zones or areas where you've got people who live, centenarians past 100 or to 100, healthy aging, like they're actually active and doing
Mhm.
well, even at the advanced elderly. And that social connection was one of the most important key factors, even if
Mhm.
they had a crappy diet.
Mhm.
So, yeah, talk to us a bit more about that, about how the social connection is important for healthy aging.
So there's several things that are happening there, right? Like you're making that connection, and now you have a social outlet for stress relief. So stress is something that can really negatively impact our overall health, and in particular our brain health. And not just because we're distracted, and it actually affects the cells and how long they can divide and replace themselves. And so there's some work from Elizabeth Blackburn. She won a Nobel Prize for this. And what she found was that if you look at the DNA, when a cell needs to divide and replicate itself, the ends of the strands of the DNA, called telomeres, will get shorter and thinner. And so that's a normal natural process to occur. the cell, our skin, right? Like we exfoliate, we get
Cell
the fresh.
turnover, new cells.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so each time the cell divides, it divides itself and replicates, and the telomeres get shorter and thinner. It divides again, shorter and thinner. It divides again, shorter and thinner. And eventually, those telomeres can't do it anymore, and the cell cannot replace itself. And so that there's a limited number of times that a cell can divide. They call it the Hayflick limit. And so when we're encountering stress, be it social stress, physical stress, acute stress, chronic stress, it's going to affect those telomeres. And if you look, there was one study that compared mothers who were caregivers to children with chronic illness to mothers who were just parents to children or healthy children, and the telomeres on the moms whose kids had chronic illness were significantly shorter, even though moms were the same age. So that
Great.
stress
That's
alone, I
that's
know.
great to know since I have a kid with chronic illness.
Me
Yay.
too. Me too. I'm like, wow, I don't want to see my telomeres.
So it's not just my perception that
No,
I'm,
it's not.
that it's killing
Not.
me.
So getting to this
Great.
point of like essentially where the stress is accelerating the aging process and we're going to get to that limit faster. And so when we have a social connection, we can kind of mitigate some of that stress. When we have a good diet, we can mitigate some of that stress. When we have antioxidants, we can mitigate some of that stress. And so that's why in the blue zones, you get all of these different components when they go together. You're really kind of um, pulling out a lot of the effects of stress on our cells. And so our bodies themselves can do what they were born to do, and that is live to upwards of 100, 107. They say the max is like 120. And I don't know that anybody's lived longer than that. So I think that that's our limit. But we're not getting there in the United States. We're not getting there when we're disconnected. We're not getting there when we have a poor diet. We're 75, which is great compared to where we used to be. But we can certainly extend it longer if we can do something to mitigate some of that extra strain on our cells.
I love this. Fascinating. So, in terms of other things that can impact the brain, I mean, we talk about, when you have a baby, there's that postpartum period where it's like baby brain,
Mhm.
and you feel like your brain is completely scrambled and you can't remember things. You
Mhm.
can barely remember your own name, or you walk into a room and why am I here? And then it happens again
Mhm.
in perimenopause.
Yeah.
So, talk to us a little bit more about that. Are these phenomena related? Are they similar? Are they the same? Is it estrogen? What's going on?
Okay. So I can speak to one of those as an academic and one of those as a mother.
Right, exactly.
So the the baby brain, as an academic, I have not examined that part of the lifespan. But it makes sense that it would happen. You're now entering suddenly a time in your life that is full of stress. It's good stress, but it's stress, right? And you have a large shift in hormones. You have 25 extra things that you need to be worried about that are not you or anything that you were worried about before you gave birth or adopted or whatever the case may be. And so your brain is going to be scrambled. We can't hold on to that many things at once. Our memory does not work that way. Our memory works in limited chunks. So in any given moment, we can only hold on a handful of things. And so if you're worried about, did the baby have enough wet diapers? Did you get formula? Is the electric bill paid? Is the heat on warm enough? Did I put the blankets in the dryer? Like, you're at your capacity. You're going to forget that you put dinner in the oven. That's just how our memory works.
Yep.
And so I would
Hard
say,
drive full.
yeah. So in that regard, I think it's partially hormonal and partially situational. In perimenopause, it's partially hormonal and it's partially neurological. And so what's happening in perimenopause, and you will hear people on social media saying, you're losing brain cells, so you're declining and you're going to end up with dementia. And I want to poke them in the eye because that's not what's happening. Yes, you are losing brain cells, but not in a bad way. You're losing them because you don't need them. You've now lived long enough to know what you need and what you don't. You are pruning out what is unnecessary. And so there is a
This is
shift.
fascinating. Yeah, I've heard the term pruning, and I've
Mhm,
heard this concept that when you go through perimenopause and menopause, that it's like this reorganization.
mhm.
And that's when women sort of realize, like, and they don't have any more fucks left to give. Like,
You're pruning out the fucks. You have
yeah,
none left. It really is. And so when you hear people say like when you're older you have no filter anymore. You just say what you want. You just don't care and you like don't care what people think. It's true. It absolutely is true. So you get to this point where now you've lived long enough to keep the quality over quantity. And you keep what you need and you disregard what you don't. And so there is a reorganization, there is pruning, there is thinning, but it's not bad. It's minimalization. It's let me just get rid of the stuff. I don't need to maintain this anymore. Like I don't need to deal with all of the waste that these cells are providing because I don't need them. Just get rid of them. It's like cleaning out your closet. You don't need it.
but I still have like song lyrics from the 80s.
Well, because you sing it occasionally. And if you're me, you sing it occasionally to annoy your children and wake them up in the morning. I don't know
It's
if you've done this, but I do this. If they won't
so
get up,
fascinating.
I'll just go into their room and start singing loudly, badly, because I'm not a good singer, and loudly until they get up. And so they get up faster to get me to stop singing.
Brilliant. Doesn't work in my house because I'm a singer, but yeah, she wouldn't like it, I'm sure. But yeah,
So
that's
transition is
fascinating.
when you're feeling that brain fog of like, I don't really know what's happening, but you're also still dealing with a huge full plate. Like you work, you're a mom, you run a household, run an academic program, you whatever the case may be, you're full.
Well, yeah, and you're in midlife, there are so many demands put on you. You're at
Mhm.
the peak of your career. You've got all of these hormonal shifts.
Mhm.
You may have kids, you may have
Mhm.
aging parents, so there's the
Mhm.
sandwich generation
Mhm.
phenomenon. So like just the other day, my mom is visiting. She's in her 80s, my daughter is 12. We're out in downtown in the street. My daughter is running ahead into traffic.
Mhm.
My mother is lagging behind into traffic. And I am literally caught in the middle going
Mhm.
like, which direction do I
Yep.
go in?
Mhm. And then
And
you think of nothing else, you forgot
right.
everything else. You can't no human can possibly hold on to all that, no matter how sharp you are, no matter how young or older you are, it doesn't matter. That's not how our memory is meant to work, and I think when we have expectations that we can do all of that at once, we're going to be let down.
Mm.
Right? Like, "Sarah, you're a memory expert. You should remember everything." No, I don't. I'm also a human. I'm also a human. I forget stuff all the time because I'm a human and my memory works like a human. Yes, there are people that can, memorize pi or whatever the case may be, but that they only do that because they put in the effort to do it.
Yeah, and I mean, another classic example, I was talking to a really close friend the other day, and she was like, I was running around, I was doing all this stuff for my daughter's performances, and then I had to go to the pharmacy. I was late for work, et cetera, et cetera. Well, it turned out she left her car keys in the car and the car running
Mhm.
outside. Somehow it didn't, luckily, it didn't get stolen, but that's how overloaded I
Yes.
think we are at times. And as women, we think we can do it all. We think we can do everything for everyone all at once.
Mhm.
And we reach capacity
Mhm.
and we don't know how to really say no or how to say, my plate is full. I can't do this. And if
Yeah.
I do, that's kind of one of my mantras is the do one thing less theory, that if you've got all of these plates that you're
Mhm.
juggling and balancing and you add one more, it's not efficient. They're all going to
No.
crash. You have to say no to that plate and say no to extra things sometimes.
Yeah, I think her name was Jessica Turner, and she had a really great analogy. And it was, if you think about all these things as balls, and some of them are rubber and some of them are glass, and you can
Yes.
let rubber balls drop because they will bounce and they will be fine.
Yes.
So, like, for me, one of those was my children's clothing. It doesn't have to match. I don't care. I let it drop. If it fits them, it's clean and it's weather appropriate, wear it. It's
The hack for that we have for getting up in the morning is she sleeps in her clothes.
I've heard of that. I've heard of
She
that.
has slept in her clothes for years. It works. I personally, I don't understand it because she's a very, very sensory kid and like everything bothers her. And yet she will sleep in jeans. And it boggles the mind. But so these clothes are wrinkled, they're slept in, they're whatever. Hey, works for you. We're getting up.
Exactly.
It's all good.
Exactly. And then that's one thing off of your mind that you don't have to deal with.
So I want to switch gears a little bit because I know this is an area that you are a bit of an expert in. You've done some research and it's an area that is on all of our minds. And that is what technology is doing to our brains. Because I definitely feel like my brain is broken when I spend too much time on my phone, too
Mhm,
much time on the internet, too much
mhm.
time on social media, scrolling this and that. And then, I mean, I don't even know if we want to touch the topic of AI, but it's like, what do we do? Are we breaking our brains and how do we prevent that or put the brakes on and mitigate some of these factors?
So I think we're not breaking our brains. I think we're training it to do something specific, right? And we can train it to do something else specific. And so right now, and I notice this for me, scrolling like on Instagram, training yourself to expect snippets of information. Right. And so I'll even find myself like if a video is too long, I'm like, I'm done, scroll it. And it's because that's our expectation. When you remove that expectation, then you remove that training session, right? And so if you remove some of that, then you can retrain to do something different. And that can be on technology. It's not the technology that's the problem. It's what we're using it for. And
And
so
how much time we're spending on it
and not
and
even
how
how much time.
distracted we're
How
getting.
distracted it's what we're using it for. It's what is this content? And so, for example, we could be scrolling on Instagram for like 3-second videos, right? Or we could be invested in something deeper. Like my son loves to edit videos and he has an idea in his mind and he'll spend 3 or 4 hours moving clips around, making sure that like the fade in, the fade out and the screen, like it looks very artistic. And so
Wow.
it's art that he's creating. And that's a long attention span, right? So it's not the technology that he's doing something with a video. I'm also doing something with a video scrolling Instagram. But for me, it's maybe negative, right? Alternatively, maybe I want to read on my Kindle, right? It's also technology. Am I not retaining anything because it's technology? No. In fact, my comprehension is probably the same as if I was reading on a piece of paper or a paper book. And that's actually where some of my research was, and that is comparing paper to an e-reader because we are able to do that, and also comparing to the computer screen. And what we found was really there was no difference, and in some cases, people were reading more or reading faster on a device compared to on paper. But what I think is really happening is like a preference. And so, because a lot of my participants were college students, they were preferring a device. And so but then they were finding like, hey, I'm going past what I was assigned to read. I'm just continuing to read. I'm like, well, go keep reading, right? It's
Mm.
fine.
It's super fascinating because, yeah, I used to be very against e-readers and now I love them. I love
Yeah.
my Kindle. However, I know that when I used to read paper books or paper textbooks, my recall and retention, I feel like it was greater. And I would also remember like visuospatially where on the page certain
Mhm.
information was, and that's gone now because all the pages look the same.
Right. You are missing some of those cues, and if you were using some of those cues, then absolutely it could interfere. And then we're also sort of thinking about like how our resources are being used, like our mental resources. And so if we're using them in like, how do I turn the page? How do I use this device? How do I? And so someone who's maybe unfamiliar with it or doesn't use it very often, we're going to see a little bit of that kind of loss because those resources are not used to understand what we're reading. But you are right. There is some cue that you might get from turning a page, but you also can get those cues from, where are you sitting while you're reading, right? Have you ever noticed like when you are trying to remember a part of a story, you will like imagine yourself back in your reading chair or back in the room you were reading in? Those are memory cues that are helping you remember and retrieve that information. And that also applies to that I went into the kitchen and forgot where I went in there for. And you go back into the living room and you remember it again. It's just
Yes.
the thing that made you think that you need the thing is in the living room.
Right.
And you go in the kitchen, you don't have that cue anymore. It's not helping you. So you gotta either mentally restore or physically go back in the room and you get the cue again. And we have those cues, we're gonna remember more, but those cues aren't necessarily the page themselves. It could be something else. And so if you're reading deeply, if you're reading for comprehension, you're gonna remember. And it's really not the tech. So I think it's a matter of what we're doing with the tech. The tech isn't ruining us. It's how are we using it? Because we can use it well. There's a
Mm.
ton of studies showing older adults using and playing video games, and it's actually helping them with their fluid intelligence, their spatial memory, their social relationships if they're playing online. In some cases, they're playing online with their grandchildren, and so they're bonding with their grandchildren over a game. I think there was a news story about a woman. She's 103 or something, and she's a whole gaming setup. She's got a chair and the headphones, and like she loves it.
That's fabulous.
Games are so complicated these days. It is a mental exercise to play. But
Yeah.
even something like Angry Birds is helpful. It is helpful.
Oh my God, that's amazing. So, yeah, I was going to ask that, next steps, we always try to give our listeners some, very practical advice that they can use and take into their daily lives. And so, what are some things that you might recommend in terms of like aging well and keeping your stress levels down or maintaining your cognitive abilities as we get older? And as we navigate these very difficult transitions like perimenopause, is there light at the end of the tunnel? Like, how does this all play out? And what can we do on a practical level to really support healthy aging and cognitive resilience?
I would say a hobby. Find a hobby. I mean, people, and I think Good Morning America, Today's Show, not sure. One of the morning shows recently people are doing grandma hobbies. They're calling it grandma core. First of all, what they're talking about grandma hobbies are not actually grandma hobbies because the most common hobby for an older woman is reading. It's not knitting or crocheting or sewing or anything you would kind of typically think of. It's reading and church activities. So
Okay.
knitting is on the list, but it's like way down the list.
Wow. Yeah, I think I would have guessed knitting as number one.
It's not. But find a hobby. Maybe it's knitting, maybe it's reading, maybe it's skiing, maybe it's swimming. Like find a hobby because when you do that, you're learning something new, right? That's exercising your brain. Or maybe you're not learning something new, but you're advancing a skill that you already have. So maybe you already know how to knit, but you've never knit a sweater before. Maybe you're going to try knitting a sweater. That's a different set of skills, different set of stitches that you need to learn, right? So you're learning something new. Maybe you go to a class to learn that hobby or do that hobby, and now you're making relationships, right? And so when you're doing all those things, you're hitting it in all those different areas. And so if you can find a hobby, you're reducing stress because you're taking time for yourself. You're making relationships, you're learning something new, you're exercising your brain. And so you're kind of doing all of those things with that one activity.
Okay.
And what we
I love
find
it.
is people will readily adapt hobbies that are kind of in the same vein of the things that they always love to do. right? And sometimes there are slight limitations or shifts in how we do those things with health concerns that may pop up in older years. So maybe you have arthritis, and so knitting becomes more difficult, but maybe you can sew with a sewing machine, right? And so then that makes it a little bit easier on your hands. Or maybe you used to run, but now, again, maybe you have arthritis or a bad knee or something. And so maybe now you're going to walk or swim. Right. Or maybe you loved to read, but now your eyesight's not so great. So maybe you get a large print book or you get an e-reader where you can enlarge the font, or maybe you listen to audiobooks. So there's always tweaks that you can kind of make. But I would absolutely say a hobby is where you should start.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. So, in terms of a hobby, you mentioned a lot of creative things and then a lot of physical activities. And
Hmm.
how important is it to balance those out or to pursue something physical versus something creative versus something knowledge related or all of the above?
I would say all of the above, but also don't force the thing. Like, if you're not a, like, gym rat, that shouldn't be your hobby. Do the thing that you actually find enjoyable. Yes, you should still exercise, but maybe your exercise is going for a walk while you listen to an audiobook because you like to read, right? Don't force yourself to do something because you think you should. Do something that you enjoy so you'll continue to do it.
Yeah, that's good advice. As I think to myself, oh, I really have to go to the gym.
You don't have to go to the gym. You could go for a walk.
Yeah.
You can lift bottles of water from your pantry to get some weight training. Like, you don't have to do the thing if it's not appealing to you, right? You could just make sure that you're moving your body in another way. Because if it's forcing yourself, you're not going to do it.
So if you could tell your younger self something about aging, stress, and balance, what would it be?
That's a great question. I would tell my younger self about the glass balls and the rubber balls sooner.
Yeah,
Let the balls drop. Let the balls drop. Most of what you're worried about does not matter.
100%. Oh my gosh. This was such a great conversation. I think our listeners are going to get a lot out of it. And if they want to connect with you or learn more about you or your work, or how can they best do that? We'll put all of this in the show notes.
I'm probably on Instagram. I'm on Instagram all the time. They can message me. They can certainly find my email address. Also, my website's on my profile on Instagram. So, yeah, they can find me that way.
Perfect. We will do that. And thank you so much for coming on the show and being a part of this conversation. If you loved this episode and you resonated with what Dr. Sarah had to say, and you know anyone who would benefit from a conversation about healthy aging, stress, and cognition, please go ahead and share this episode with a friend. Leave us a like or a review. It really does help people discover the show. And that's really what we're here to do, is to share our message with more folks, help women get more resources that they need in order to live happier, healthier, better, richer, more fulfilling lives. And at the end of the day, always remember, burnout is not your destiny. It's your wake up call.